Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm thrilled to welcome Mark Lynn back to the podcast today to talk about Summer of 42, directed by Robert Mulligan, released 50 years ago in April of 1971. How are we doing, Mark?
Doing great. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, welcome back. I figured, well, we talked about the most successful romantic film of 1970 in Love Story. Might as well talk about the most successful romantic film of 1971, which was Summer of 42. Had you heard of this movie before?
Never have.
Okay, yeah, this was new to me. I remember looking, I was looking at the spring schedule of what came out in 71 and I'm like, Summer 42, what's this about? And I was like, I maybe not do the episode on this. And then I looked at the box office charts of 71, and this was the fourth highest grossing film of the year. And I was like, oh my gosh, is this the sequel to Love Story before this real sequel? Like, everybody loved love stories around this time, Mark. They were going nuts for them, right?
They were. So
before we get into the movie, I wanted to just start with, since we've done now, this will be the second episode of kind of about romance films. Yeah. Do you have any favorite like romantic dramas or romantic comedies or anything like that, and kind of that genre of film that you really like?
There are a couple. It's kind of surprising that the two times that I've been here have been to talk about romantic film. It's definitely not my go-to genre. Like I never thought that if I were to be talking about films that I enjoyed, it would be this category. But you know what? I'm going with it.
We'll do a horror film next time, I promise.
That's more at my alley.
With no romance at all.
No romance. Well, some romance is
maybe
fine.
A little.
Maybe a little. Let's see. Off the top of my head, the ones that stand out, and ironic, they're both from the same year, actually. So
okay.
There's My Best Friend's Wedding, 1997.
1997.
So, romantic comedy, but that's a favorite of mine. It has been for many, many years. I adore that film.
Did you see it in theaters when it first came out?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I probably too young, and probably I would have been 11 in 1997, so I don't really think 11-year-olds were lined up to see My Best Friend's Wedding, but I did see it years later, and I went, oh, this is a great film.
Hey, I was 12, Mark. I was 12, and I saw it opening day with my mom. Well, by summer of 97, I was like a big Julia Roberts fan, and she had a new romantic I was like, we're going.
And this was at the peak of Julia Roberts' screen queen romantic comedies, and one of her most successful films.
Yeah.
Commercially successful.
Yeah, actually, Mark, she had a few flops before this. So if you look at her career, like, she was huge from like 89 to 91. She's in Steel Magnolias and Pretty Woman, which put her on the map. Both of those films gets her an Oscar nomination. And then she takes a break from acting for about 2 years after Hook in 91. She comes back with a huge hit in The Pelican Brief with Denzel Washington. And then she did like 4 or 5 kind of flops in a row. She did I Love Trouble with Nick Nolte, Something to Talk About with Dennis Quaid, and she's like in supporting roles in a bunch of 96 movies, like Everyone Says I Love You, and what was the other one? Michael Collins with Liam Neeson. And then her biggest flop, I think, was Mary Riley with John Malkovich. So she was not like a huge superstar 97, even though I had seen most of those movies and loved her in them. This movie really put her back on the map, and that's where she stayed for many, many years. After this, she's in she's in Notting Hill 2 years after this, and Runaway Bride, and then Erin Brockovich, which wins her the Oscar. So yes. My Best Friend's Wedding was like a really important film for Julia Roberts' career. This put her back at the top of the A-list for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then the other movie from 1997, romantic, different, not a romantic comedy, but Titanic. I mean, that's kind of go-to.
I'm like, my brain's like, what's another romantic comedy from 97 that I like? And then you say Titanic. Yes, romantic drama.
Yes.
I just read an article about that the other day of like So when it came out, everybody loved it, right? For like the first year, like, oh my gosh, greatest movie ever. And then it went into this like window of time where everyone was like knocking it, right? Like, oh, you like Titanic? That movie's stupid.
It became a punching bag
Yeah,
for a lot. I think it just became so
successful.
so huge,
Yeah,
but it sort of became, people thought it was schmaltzy and, over the top, overdone, in that period where
yeah.
everyone was kind of deriding it. But I don't know, I loved it from the first, and I still
Yeah, I've never not loved that movie. If it's not in my top 10, but it'd definitely be in my top 20, I think, of favorite movies. Like that's one of those movies you can watch anytime from beginning to end. It never gets old. It's the fastest 3 hours of maybe any movie ever made. Like it's just so compelling. And boy, did James Cameron get lucky with his two leads, right? I mean, have you heard like Matthew McConaughey was like considered for Jack? Like he had a great audition, and there was an interview with him where he's like, he was definitely in the running, and it's like, oh my god.
Could you imagine? All right, Rose.
McConaughey and Titanic. Like, I mean, would it have ruined the whole movie? Maybe not, but boy.
No, would it have been as big of a hit? I don't know.
Yeah, we'll never know. Casting is so crucial to these big hit, beloved films and television shows. Sometimes it's just one wrong person, and it's
and especially for those two. I mean, those two were catapulted to superstardom from that movie. I mean,
yeah,
I really do think that they were a crucial part of the phenomenon that it became.
It still surprises me that DiCaprio was not nominated for an Oscar for Titanic. Isn't that crazy to think? He was nominated a bunch of times for other films, but he didn't get one for Titanic. He makes that movie work. Kate Winslet is phenomenal in it too. She's fantastic. DiCaprio makes Titanic what it is, I think. Like he makes that movie just really special.
I adore Kate Winslet, so I'm partial to her, and she got an Oscar nod for it. But
yes, and Kate Winslet is one of my favorites too. She's fantastic in that. Kate Winslet is one of those actors. I will watch her in anything. I just watched her in this movie, Mark. I had never heard of it before. I was like, it's Susan Sarandon and Mia Wasikowska. How do you say her last name? Kate Winslet. It's called Blackbird. It's on Amazon Prime. And it just like they just dropped it with no marketing. I'd never heard of it before until I was just like searching through. I was like, Kate Winslet is in a new movie I've never heard of. And I watched it and I really enjoyed it. I'm like, how come I don't know about this?
that flew under my radar too.
Yeah, like she's in a new film called Ammonite, which is actually another really strong film. But Winslet's been a little bit under the radar lately, right? Like some of her films have been kind of like not marketed very well. I don't know. Or maybe she's still acting.
I mean, the last big thing that I can think of that she was in was the Divergent films.
Yep. Yeah, she was in Divergent 1 and 2. The second one, I believe, was called Insurgents. The last film of hers I saw in a theater was what was it called? The one with Idris Elba, The Mountains Between Us. Is that what it's called?
I think, yes, that sounds familiar.
Something like that. I really enjoyed that too. But yeah, I'm waiting for kind of another kind of breakthrough for her. It's been a few years. Her last Oscar nomination was for Steve Jobs from 2015, which she was really great in that. But in terms of romantic films, like, so my all-time favorite romantic comedy is When Harry Met Sally. Have you seen that?
You know what? This might be blasphemous. I've never seen When Harry Met Sally.
Oh, it's so good. Like I saw it for the first time in high school, and it's even when I was very young, I was like, oh, this is good. This is really fantastic. The chemistry between Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal is so great. And it's a screenplay by the great Nora Ephron, who I love, directed by Rob Reiner. Everything clicks in it. Carrie Fisher's really funny in a supporting role. It's definitely worth a look. If you like romantic comedies at all, I mean, I don't know if we get My Best Friend's Wedding without When Harry Met Sally, which came 8 years before. It's so good. So that's my favorite romantic comedy.
I have no excuse for not having seen it. I just never got into it.
It's like 90 minutes, Mark. It's 90 minutes. It is, if Titanic's the fastest 3 hours, When Harry Met Sally is the fastest 90 minutes you'll ever see. Yeah, so and then I love Titanic, of course. I'm a big Sandra Bullock fan, so I love her romantic comedies like The Proposal and While You Were Sleeping. Yeah. And we talked about this before on our Patreon exclusive episode about Ethan Hawke. Our listeners should go check that out on the Patreon page. I talked about the Before trilogy, right? That's him and Julie Delpy. And I believe back in October, Mark, I gave you homework to watch those 3 movies. Did you see those?
I haven't. I failed.
Oh, you failed. No, it's okay. It's okay.
I've got to watch it.
My favorite, if I had to pick my favorite romantic drama, it might be Before Sunset, the second film of the 3. I just watched the second half of it the other night. It was on TV. I was in bed, like getting ready to go to sleep, and I stayed up till like 12:20 a.m. watching the second half of that movie again. It'd been a few years since I'd seen it.
Yeah,
so good. So yeah, the Before trilogy. Romance. I mean, that's a genre that goes all the way back to the 30s and the 40s. I mean, even before that. I mean, since the beginning of movies, right? We've had romance films, and it's a drama that can be it's a genre that can be a slog, right? If not done well. Where if there's no chemistry between the leads, if it's not working very well, it can be a rough go. But exactly. But one movie that I didn't find to be a rough go, I really enjoyed, was our film for today, and that is Summer of 42, directed by Robert Mulligan. So what we're gonna do here, like how we usually do on the podcast, for those listeners who might not know what the movie's about, I'll just give a brief rundown of like a summary of the movie. I've got some really interesting trivia bits about this one. A lot of cool background information, and you can chime in with anything you want during that part, Mark. And then we'll talk about our give our thoughts on the movie. All right, so Summer of 42. This came out in April of 71. It's about a 15-year-old named Hermie. Well, at the very beginning, we get his voiceover, right? He's in middle age. And I believe I read that that's the voice of the film's director, Robert Mulligan. That's Mulligan, which I didn't find out till later. Yeah. So Hermie in middle age is reflecting on his summer of 1942 when he was 15. World War II has obviously just begun, right? So Pearl Harbor was December of 41. So this would have been the summer after that. Mm-hmm. Girls, of course, are at the top of his mind. He and his friends spend the summer on an island off the coast of New England, having adventures, going on dates, getting into trouble. There are girls everywhere, but the one Hermie can't stop thinking about is a young war bride named Dorothy. Her husband was just shipped overseas to go into combat, so she's like living alone in a kind of a cottage, a house by the ocean. So they start as friends who see each other from time to time. Of course, he's like spitting with her, but an event from her life kind of changes the nature of their friendship towards the end of the film. That's kind of like the basic summary of it. Anything you want to add to that? Like, his friends are, I think, key to this movie too.
Yeah, well, it kind of starts off, and certainly at least the first half of the movie, it's a coming of age, mm-hmm. teenage boys, and they're trying to navigate because it also focuses on their own attempts at having experiences with girls their age and some of the mishaps and things that come from that. So yeah, a combination of coming of age / romance. So it's got quite a few things going on here.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So some background information on the movie, Mark. We have Herman Rotcher wrote the screenplay. He received an Oscar nomination for his script. He also wrote the film Sweet November from 1968. That was also remade into a film with Keanu Reeves and Charlize Theron, you might have heard of. That's actually just celebrated its 20th anniversary, not necessarily a movie that people are raving about 20 years later. He also wrote a drama called The Great Santini in the late 70s with Robert Duvall, which I have not seen. It's supposed to be really, really good. So Rotcher later said, so the film was autobiographical. This was based on his experiences as a 14, 15-year-old. It's very, very close to what happened to him, including the whole story with Dorothy. That's right. Based on his own experience. Mm-hmm. I guess he didn't even change character names. Like the friends and Dorothy, like that, those were their real names of the people. I guess he never found out Dorothy's last name in real life. So I guess, did we ever hear her last name in the movie? So it's just Dorothy, right? So
and you don't even find out her first name until like a good.
It was a while. It's one thing when I'm taking my notes, I'm like, I try as early on as possible to know what the names are of everybody, and I'm like, what's her name? Because I try not to look on IMDb when I'm watching a film for the podcast for the first time. I just like to watch it just fresh. I don't want to know very much, so I'm not like looking up trivia until after I've watched it. And I was like, what is her name? Finally here it's Dorothy. So like with Love Story, the last film we talked about on the regular podcast in December, the studio had Roger write a book version to come out before the movie. That book became a huge bestseller in 1970 and brought lots of interest to the project. The same thing, Mark, that they did on Love Story. But this time for Summer 42, they had wrapped production of the movie. And then they came to Roger and said, hey, let's put out a book and get people interested in the property. Yeah. And I guess he wrote the book in 3 weeks. They published it, huge bestseller. And the same thing. Like people read the book and then they took their friends and their parents and everybody else and they went to the movie, right?
It's a great promotional tool, that's for sure.
Does anyone do that now? I don't think that's not a thing nowadays.
I was just thinking nowadays it has to be an established property if you're going to base like there has to be like a bestseller, a book that, and then will get turned into movies. But for that sort of, well, we're going to start it off as, you know, drumming up interest in it by making it a book. That's not really something you see happening anymore.
Yeah, like there are, as you say, there's bestsellers that become movies, but even then, right? I mean, especially now, right? It's like a lot of these movies just like dropping on Netflix, like The Woman, what's it called? The Woman in the Window, I believe it's called, with Amy Adams, like huge bestseller novel from a couple years ago, right? And that kept getting pushed back, and finally it's dropping on Netflix, I believe, this summer. But yeah, pre-awareness is such, you know, plays such an important role in the film world now. Like if Summer of 42 were coming out now and there was no book, it'd be kind of difficult to get people interested.
Exactly.
So it's just kind of an interesting trick that they would pull. Like it's not like he wrote the book, bestseller, and then let's adapt it into a film. It's like, no, it's like it's like a marketing ploy. It's like, let's write a prose version of this, get it out to the masses just to drum up interest in the movie. There's something a little bit icky about that. I don't know if you think the same thing, but especially he wrote it in 3 weeks. I can't imagine it's great literature.
Yeah, I'd be curious how good of a book it actually is.
Yeah, I'd be curious too. But as I said, you know, this was a really big hit in 71. I had heard of Love Story for most of my life. I had never heard of this movie before, which is kind of interesting. You think even when I was younger, like, you know, maybe it had played more on television or something, like it's not a big deal today. I feel like, I mean, maybe like older audiences still remember it fondly, but it's not definitely a movie that people are talking about very much now. So the film was directed by Robert Mulligan. He received an Oscar nomination, not for Summer of 42, but for To Kill a Mockingbird, which came out in 1962, probably his most famous movie.
Yep.
He also directed beloved films like Inside Davy Clover, same time next year. His final feature film would be The Man in the Moon, which was Reese Witherspoon's first role in a movie. That was her debut. Yep. So it was the director's final film, and it was Witherspoon's first. That's kind of interesting, like crossroads there. He finishes his career there, and she skyrockets, becomes one of our, you know, definitely one of my favorite actresses.
Definitely a hallmark of our generation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if you're of our generation, you grew up with Witherspoon.
And that would have been 1990, 1991?
1991, right? Man on the Moon comes out. So he had a long career. He was directing, I think, all the way back into the 50s. So from the 50s to 91, he was, you know, a figure in the directing world. This I found interesting, Mark. According to his wife, this was one of Stanley Kubrick's favorite films. He loved it so much that in The Shining, there's a scene where Shelley Duvall is watching a movie on TV, and it's Summer of 42. It's the scene where Hermie brings home Dorothy's groceries. I have seen The Shining a gazillion times. I was like, do they show the movie? Is it just like, it might be just she's watching the TV and you're hearing dialogue. That's what I'm assuming. I didn't go back and check. But I'm like, I feel like I would have noticed the clip from this movie if it's in The Shining, right?
Yeah. Kubrick's, okay, wow. Not a film that I would have pegged for Kubrick to love so much, but okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to picture Kubrick of all directors, like just adoring this film. He was an interesting cat, man. That guy comes up on so many like trivia, background information on so many films, especially around this time when he was active and making movies.
And for someone of, you know, his singular approach and stature, again, it's hard to fit this kind of movie into, and how much of an influence this movie might have had upon, I don't know. Very, very.
Maybe he had a love story like Summer 42 in him. He just never got a chance to make it. He made that year A Clockwork Orange instead.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting.
After doing his last film, Eyes Wide Shut.
Eyes Wide Shut.
Maybe that was his plan, but he died shortly after.
Yeah.
So.
His tribute to Summer 42 was Eyes Wide Shut. Here's my version. So this really blew my mind, Mark. So we do not meet Hermie's parents, right? No. We only do we hear the dad? We hear the mom off screen.
Yes.
Right? So the off-screen voice of his mother is Oscar winner Maureen Stapleton, a major actress figure of the 70s and 80s.
She's uncredited.
So I think she had a connection to someone on the film. I think it was just probably like Mulligan brought her in for an hour or something and had her do it. But kind of took me aback because I made a note of this and we'll talk about it. I thought his mom sounded extremely old. I was like, that's his mother? That sounds like a grandmother. But hey, if you get Maureen Stapleton to do it uncredited, it doesn't matter how old she is. Bring her in. All right. So outside of the beginning and end credits of the movie, the composer Michel Legrand only used music in the film in scenes involving Dorothy and or Hermie's romantic feelings towards her. So any scene in the movie that's not about Dorothy, not with Dorothy in the scene or him thinking about her, which is why that fight scene, remember that fight scene that they have that goes on and on and on?
Yeah.
Towards the beginning, I was like, oh, no music. That's a choice. And so that was a decision made by the composer, which it worked out because do you know what Oscar this movie won, Mark?
Original score.
Original score. Dramatic score. That's what it's called in 71. Okay. So yeah. So what other movie have we talked about, Mark, where it was nominated for a bunch of stuff and only won for score?
Was it Love Story?
Love Story. Yeah. That's like the similarities, Mark, are really insane here. Okay. So there's that. I'm like, okay, that's really weird. Like so the Oscars, the Academy, they're basically saying if you make a really successful romantic drama, we'll give you score. Nothing else. That's it. So on a budget of about $1 million, this film made $32 million at the US box office, making it the fourth highest grossing film of 1971, behind The French Connection, Billy Jack, which is a movie I know nothing about. I need to look up more on Billy Jack, and Fiddler on the Roof, which is like a big kind of year-end musical.
Love that movie.
This movie, I said it on Love Story. I'm saying it again. This movie beat out like some big titles of. I mean, what about Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? They came out in June of 71.
That's right.
Summer of 42 was a bigger box office earner than Willy Wonka. Okay, like that surprises me.
Maybe I'm for some reason am I wrong on this that I don't remember Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory being as like I think it developed more.
I think you're right. I think it was a little bit more of a cult movie. Like some audience members didn't really know what to make of it when it first came out, maybe. And it developed over the years, like how great it is.
This is a discussion for another day. I have very strong opinions about Roald Dahl film adaptations.
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely get into that. Bedknobs and Broomsticks comes out in December, and Diamonds Are Forever, the James Bond movie. Now, I'm like, okay, wait. So there's no way that the Sean Connery James Bond movie, Diamonds Are Forever, made less than this. Like maybe it's considering like the calendar time, like January 1st to December 31st, because Diamonds Are Forever came out at the very end of December. Maybe that's considered more of like a 72. But I mean, it's possible, but boy, that would be shocking to me if Summer of 42 made more money than a Bond movie, but who knows?
Sure. Yeah.
So like with Love Story, this film did very, very well at the box office. And this I love to read. This made me smile. So the studio did not initially think the movie was going to be successful. So they didn't want to pay the screenwriter, Rocher, very much. So what they ended up giving him was 10% of the gross.
Well,
Instead, they didn't pay him anything up front. They just gave him 10% of the gross, thinking that the movie wouldn't be very successful. Rocher later said in 2002 that getting 10% of the gross of Summer of 42 paid his bills for the rest of his life.
well, joke's on them.
Yes, I love that. You write one screenplay, like they could have given him just a little bit up front or maybe a little more,
right.
and that would have been one payment or whatever. Instead, they give him 10% of the. That's a lot for a screenwriter. 10%. I think that's unheard of now. Like I don't think that would ever happen now. Maybe like a very limited indie movie, but.
And then it was what made about $1 million or so dollars, and then it's grossing over 30 million. I mean,
yeah, but I think the 10%, I think that extends to like home video too. Like I don't think it's just theatrical. I think he got like a chunk of home video, and so yeah.
That is
but I love that 30 years on, he's like, yeah, so I didn't really have to work after that.
That is poetic justice.
You've heard those stories, right, Mark, of actors and directors and screenwriters. They talk about, if they get a little bit of the gross or whatever, they're just constantly getting checks in the mail, right? Every few months, they'll get a check. Like the famous story of George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. They both had their films coming out in 1977. Spielberg had Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and Lucas had Star Wars. And they, as directors do, apparently, they were like, which one's going to be more successful? And Lucas was like, clearly, yours is going to be more successful, Spielberg. And Spielberg's like, I don't know. I think Star Wars has a chance. Like, I think Lucas, before that movie came out or the months before, he thought Star Wars was not going to be a big moneymaker. He was very nervous.
Yeah.
Like there were screenings of that movie with friends and things where there wasn't a score yet and the visual effects were halfway done. And Lucas was like, oh, this could be a disaster. So he talked Spielberg into swapping points on their movies. So Spielberg took points on Star Wars and Lucas took points on Close Encounters. And Spielberg, I want to say in the last 5 or 6 years, I read it somewhere, he said, Spielberg to this day is still getting checks for Star Wars.
Wow.
Because you need it, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like that would be a case where Spielberg would be like, to charity. I would be surprised if Spielberg's cashing the Star Wars check. I think that would be a fund for charity or something. But that's so fascinating to me. The idea of like doing a project, you get points, residuals, whatever, and 30, 40 years later, you're still getting checks in the mail. That's so fantastic.
Well done.
I love it. If it's a worthwhile film, if it's a good film. All right, so I have a couple more things here. So the film received 4 Golden Globe nominations. This is like my 8th or 9th episode of the 1971 season that I've recorded. Mark, very few of the films I've talked about so far have gone as far as Golden Globes or Oscar nominations. Like a lot of these films of the early part of 71 just kind of came and went. This is the case. I think this is the only second one I've talked about that actually got nominations for the upcoming award ceremonies. Mm-hmm. So Summer of 42 got Best Motion Picture Drama and Best Director nominations at the Golden Globes. Didn't win any Golden Globes. At the Oscars, it was nominated for Best Screenplay for Rocher, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing. And its only win was for Best Score for Legrand. So once again, just like Love Story, it's the only Oscar is for music. Yep. So that was interesting. And Mark, just like Love Story, do you know what the other big similarity is between the films? Did you look up anything more about what came after? There is a sequel I had never heard of before.
Nope.
Released, thankfully, this time, Mark, it's 2 years later, not 8.
Not 8 years.
In 1973, we get Class of 44, starring the same 3 male actors, also written by Rocher, not directed by Mulligan. It's a different director. The sequel takes place at the end of their high school years.
Yeah.
I'm assuming there might be a little bit like where he talks about Dorothy, but I don't think Dorothy's like the focus of the sequel. from what I could see.
Yeah, just looking right, it says that Jennifer O'Neill, who played Dorothy, didn't appear. No, you're right.
Okay.
Yeah, that she didn't appear in the film at all, nor was the character of Dorothy mentioned.
Oh, she's
So
not even mentioned.
that answers the
Interesting.
question.
So they thought that audiences wanted a sequel where it's just about the three boys again, but nothing to do with Dorothy.
Yes, no.
Wouldn't
Well,
it make sense, Mark, to have a sequel 2 years later where there was like one more encounter with Dorothy or something? That would make sense to me, but
yeah. Well, apparently no one else liked that idea because it was not well received.
yeah. So like with the Love Story sequel, what was it called? Oliver's Story. Also, this sequel not very well received. There was not a third. There was not a Summer of 46, third one. But that's kind of interesting that I mean, obviously it did well enough that they thought, well, audiences might want to see one more film, one more adventure about these three friends. But, it's Summer of 42, as we'll get into. It's like, it's only partly about the friendship. And it's also, but, the other half of the movie is really kind of Hermes coming of age and kind of falling for this older woman.
Right.
And then the final piece of trivia I saw was that there was an off-Broadway musical produced in 2001, endorsed by Roger. I don't think he wrote it, but he gave his best wishes.
Yeah.
But it went under after the September 11th terrorist attacks. That put this one to kibosh. But yeah, there was an off-Broadway musical of Summer of 42. So, I mean, that means that come 99, 2000, there must have still been some interest in this property. Otherwise, why would they have made it if people weren't still watching the movie? I don't know.
That doesn't sound terribly appealing to me.
I think I'd rather watch the sequel.
Yeah.
And I watch the Broadway.
I have a lot of strong feelings, but I have strong feelings about the whole let's turn movies into Broadway musicals.
Oh, you're a little tired of that. Any movie that has some popularity, it becomes a Broadway musical.
The majority of them I have zero interest in checking out.
I'm reading John Waters' memoir right now, and I just read the chapter on Crybaby, and he talks about how there was a failed musical of Crybaby, like in the late 2000s. And I'm like, oh yeah, I totally forgot. Like, obviously we all know Hairspray the musical. I totally forgot there was a Crybaby musical. So yeah, there's a lot of these movies that come and go. Although, Mark, I really enjoyed the musical of Ghost, which came out. It was on Broadway in the summer of 2012. My mom and I and my Aunt Debbie, we went to New York for like 3 days just on a whim in June of 2012. And we saw the Spider-Man musical, which was questionable. And we saw Ghost. And my mom, it's one of her favorite movies, right? After Love Story, it's Ghost. So I'm like, okay, we're going to go see Ghost. We were all weeping at the end, Mark. It was really good. And then I found out it closed like a month later. So it didn't do extraordinarily well, but I'm glad I got to see it. It was really great. I still have the soundtrack. I still listen to the soundtrack. So not all of them are failures, but sometimes it's a little questionable. Why do we have to make every successful movie into a Broadway show? Yeah. I'm just ready for Broadway to come back at this point, Mark. I don't care. You can take all my worst movies ever made, any movie I hate Broadway, turn it into a show. I'll go see it at this point, because it's been a long time. I love live theater. It's been more than a year. My last live theater show came to Reno in January of 2020. So it's been more than a year since I've seen anything live for the stage. I can't wait till that comes back. I don't know about you.
It's been a while since I've seen live, but even just being able to go to a movie theater would be nice.
Yeah, let's start with the movie theater experience. I feel like that will come first. And then the stage, but hopefully soon. All right, Mark. So that's all the trivia I have. Unless you have anything to add to that, let's talk about the movie.
Let's do it.
So what did we think of Summer of 42? And how did it compare to Love Story?
Well, to be honest, wasn't that crazy about it.
Okay, let's get into it. All right. So what did we not like about Summer of 42?
Well, thinking of comparing it with Love Story and thinking, so I did get a sense pretty early on that it was a similar film in a lot of ways to Love Story. And I get similar feelings about it. But I liked Love Story a lot more than
Okay.
this one. And there are multiple reasons why it just didn't really click with me. For what, although it came out a year after Love Story, to me it felt script wise and story. I don't know. There was something about it that it felt like an older movie than
Oh
Love
yeah.
Story.
I would agree with that. Yeah,
Felt
if
like
Love Story, we talked about like Love Story felt like a late 60s movie. Summer of 42 definitely would feel like, outside of maybe like what the cinematography and some of these things are, we're a little bit more forward. It really does feel like an old-fashioned movie, but maybe that's Robert Mulligan's intention because it's supposed to be set in 42.
maybe because it definitely the dialogue and the pacing, it felt like something that would have come out, maybe not the exact like story elements, but it did feel like something that would have come out in 42 or maybe 52, maybe 52, but definitely not 70. It felt like an earlier movie than Love Story.
Okay, so how do you think, Mark, since it's set in 42 and it's kind of this coming of age, this kind of quiet, tender romance drama, how would the movie have been done differently to make you happier in 71? Are you like pushing the boundary of like, I mean, it is very slow. Did you want it to like move a little faster, have a little bit more complexity among the relationships, or?
I really don't. It's hard to say what I don't know. I think maybe it's just my own personal bias. I've never been one interested in. I'm all for coming of age stories. Don't get me wrong. But I've always found it difficult to connect to those coming of age stories about young boys just thinking and talking about girls and sex all the time.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm sure there are multiple reasons why I can't connect with it, but I've never been able to connect. You know, I've never been able to connect to those kinds of stories about boys just being boys. I guess maybe because I was never one of those boys myself, but
Okay.
those I've never been a fan of those types of movies and just boys being boys being boys. So I don't know. Maybe that was just the biggest barrier to me really liking the movie that much.
Okay. So I did not love this movie. I definitely liked it more than you did. I thought that last 20 minutes it fell apart for me a little bit. And we'll talk a little bit about it. I won't give away everything.
Yeah.
It had a very abrupt ending with the voiceover again. I was like, "Oh, well that's it." I feel like we needed more at the end. It's just a matter of there's, so many movies I see now just move so fast. There is still something I enjoy about Robert Mulligan, just like really just letting the behavior and the characters just kind of do their thing. There's not a real like plot here, like let's get to the conflict, let's get to this. It's just kind of like a nice, kind of lovely film. I really found myself enjoying it for the most part. I mean, there are scenes in this film I think work really well, especially with comedy. The scene where he's trying to buy condoms, I thought was done. I thought, first off, I mean, we've kind of seen that scene before in some other things, especially like around 2000, right? Pretty much every like teen comedy would have some sort of a riff on that. Yeah. I found like this one to be the most authentic of like his nervousness and him I'll get strawberry ice cream. Like the way Mulligan just lets that scene go on, and you're just like with him, like, oh, come on, you can do it. Like there were parts of this movie I thought were really lovely. The cinematography was beautiful. I was really happy to see that got nominated at the Oscars. I really liked it. Kind of reminded me of the cinematography in another film I talked about on the podcast a few months ago called Ryan's Daughter. But this movie is not 3.5 hours long, Mark. So that I enjoyed that.
Mercifully, it's
like
not.
like the location, the setting is really lovely, and the shots of the ocean. Like there's that scene where he goes up and talks to Dorothy, and they're just sitting and talking, and then we get like a shot from behind them, and you just see the water. There's some really nice touches with the look of this movie. And is this movie setting the world on fire? Is it doing anything like extremely unique compared to anything else I've seen? No, but I don't know. I've always liked, my favorite novel is Boy's Life by Robert McCammon, which is like a coming of age. I believe he's a little younger than 15. I think he's like 11 or 12 in that story. But it kind of reminded me of that kind of nostalgic like feeling of when you were a kid, and when you had your whole life ahead of you and you're just hanging out with your friends. And I like seeing these friends being able to just roam around the island and not feeling like they have to be at home. Like that's so many kids, especially with the pandemic and things, like like kids feel like they can't go anywhere or do anything with their friends. I kind of like that aspect of it.
Right.
And I loved the score. I thought the score was fantastic. When I looked up that had won the Oscar, I was very happy. I really do love the score in this. And yeah, I feel like it falls apart a little bit at the end. It just felt a little too abrupt. But until the last 20 minutes, I was pretty on board with this, you know? I mean, it's probably of the 9 films I've looked at for 71 so far, it'd be in the top 3 for sure. So you on the other hand, were sitting there like counting the minutes.
I was bored. I won't lie.
Pretty bored. Okay.
And I had a lot of other thoughts going on about what was coming up and some of the dynamics of the story that I'm sure we'll maybe get to, but it was hard for me to just take the story at face value, because there were a lot of things that I was analyzing and thinking about and just going like, oh, like this just didn't sit right with me for multiple reasons. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean,
movie watch, I will give it that. And there were some elements that made me like you said, that did kind of pull you back to being that age. And so those parts of it I thought were good. And I did like the relationship between the friends. But like I said, just that kind of, not that it's a raunchy comedy, in the vein of, like later, 2000s, teen movies.
But I would much prefer this kind of movie, Mark, than like the stuff we got around 2000. That was just every other week we get another raunchy teen comedy. Like American Pies are great. I love the 3 American Pie movies. But like some of those other ones around that time, I will take Summer of 42 any day.
Even then, American Pie didn't really, and I was at where it was like, oh yeah, like you totally have to be American Pie. I was 13 when that movie came out, and even then, it didn't do anything. Like
really, okay.
That time,
but boy, that first one, I saw that with my dad opening weekend, and we were howling through the whole thing. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think like how raunchy some of those movies were when you look at them again.
You saw it with your dad?
I saw it with my dad.
Oh yeah. Oh no, that would have been so uncomfortable.
You would have, yeah. No, yeah, I could see pretty much anything with my dad. I mean, whatever. I saw Eyes Wide Shut with my dad when I was 14.
Oh, I would have been so uncomfortable.
You'd be like, Dad, can you move over like 8 seats? Okay, thanks.
I'm in my mid-30s, and if there is some kind of like sex scene that comes on TV and I'm in the room with my parents, like I still cringe and I'm like, oh God, I don't want to.
I'll never forget this. So the first R-rated movie I saw with in a theater, I saw it with my dad, was True Lies with Schwarzenegger and Jamie Lee Curtis. And that scene where she's just got like a bra and her underwear on and she's dancing. My dad was doing this. He was like, oh my God. And then the second R-rated film I seen in the theater is Time Cop with Jean-Claude Van Damme. And that time, both my mom and my dad came. And that first 10 minutes of that movie, there's a very explicit sex scene. And my mom was doing this, man. She had her hands over my eyes. She was like, oh my God. I remember her yelling at my dad after, like, what did you do? Yeah. So I was pretty comfortable with my parents growing up, seeing whatever. But I think it would have been uncomfortable for me to see Summer of 42 with my dad, because he would have been snoring for the entire movie, and I wouldn't have been able to hear the dialogue.
Yeah.
I could like see my dad like, oh, nap time.
I would have been right there with your dad.
Well, thank you for staying awake, Mark. Well, my review of the film, Brian, is that I took a little nap. It was I'd had a long day and I needed some rest. Thank you for this opportunity, Brian, to give me some sleep
so that I could know what I was talking about.
No. I mean, I don't know. Part of it is, I think, like the poster and the title, and having just watched Love Story, which is there's more going on in Love Story, but that's also kind of a quiet, kind of slow film.
Yeah.
And I kind of had an idea of what I was getting into. I am a little bit familiar with the career of Robert Mulligan, the director, To Killing Mockingbird and The Man in the Moon and Up the Down Staircase and Clara's Heart, are 4 films of his I've seen. and they're all kind of slow. So I was, oh, it's about like a coming of age of a boy on an island, and this is going to be kind of slow. Like, so I kind of went in with expectations of what the movie was, and it pretty much met that. Like, it kind of got what I was expecting. Whereas you might have put this on thinking it was something a little bit like more comedic or something a little bit different.
I didn't even know. I just put it. I didn't even really know what I was expecting, so I just sort of put it on and said, "Okay, here we go."
Here we go. 20 minutes in, you're like, Brian, Brian, you're gonna have to pay me for this one. All right, so let's talk about some other things I didn't necessarily love about it. So, as I said, the ending, which we'll talk about a little bit. I didn't like how the parents of Hermie are non-characters in the movie. That felt a very strange choice. Like, it's told from the point of view of Hermie, and that's fine. And his fixation is on this young woman and spending time with his friends. But why tell a story? I mean, this is about an hour and 45 minutes. Why not have some scenes with the parents? I wanted to get to know them a little bit. That just felt kind of an odd choice. What did you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think too much of it until you just pointed it out. But yeah,
Maureen Stapleton could have played the mom.
Maybe though, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it could have been, this is really from the perspective of this teenage boy. And so at that age, I mean, for me personally, I remember thinking, you know, everything that was happening at that age, 15, 16, going out with my friends and the last thing on my mind, I mean, aside from having to get permission to go places and not be out until 4 a.m. But
in shelter.
But the last thing on my mind was my parents were very removed from my frame of mind at that time in my life when I was going out and discovering the world and being with. So maybe that's the only kind of I can make to that choice, is that maybe he is similarly just, I'm not focusing on my parents. I'm focusing on myself and my friends and this woman that I'm infatuated with. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was a choice, and I'd rather have it be this than we get 2 brief glimpses of mom saying, "Hey, be home by 8," or something like that, where it's just like a side thing. Like, if they were going to bring in the parents, I would have wanted 2 to 3 significant scenes with them. I just felt like there was an opportunity. I was thinking about the end of Call Me by Your Name. Have you seen that movie? Like, where Timothée Chalamet is talking to his dad, and they have that heart to heart at the end of that movie. It's one of the best scenes of the film. And I feel like, you know, he's like, Hermie's going through such turmoil in this movie. I felt like there was an opportunity to have a really good character actor, like a dad or a mom, like, and have him like talk to them about what he's going through. I mean, I don't know, maybe that would have been a different movie, but I just felt like there was an opportunity there that I wonder if I haven't read the book. I wonder if the parents are more figures in the book, or they just, I mean, that was a choice at some point. You know, they talked about that. Like, should we have the parents in the movie? No. Okay.
Who knows?
I mean, it worked out for Roger. He got an Oscar nomination and bills paid for the rest of his life. So I think he's good. You're like, take that money away.
Hey,
the payment stop now. Film at 50 is here to say, cut the checks.
Props to him. That's all. You know, I'm not going to hate on him for that.
Yeah. So as I said, his mom did sound very old. That was a questionable choice, but it is, you know, a great Oscar-winning actress, so that's okay. I thought, you know, the friend stuff is really great. There's maybe a little bit too much of it. I felt it kind of odd that the third friend, Benji, disappears for the second half of the movie. Like, he's just gone. Like, does he ever come back? But the very last shot when they're running off into the distance, I think it's 3 of them, right?
Oh, maybe. Oh,
yeah. I think it's 3 of them. But that was very strange. It's very much a film about 3 male friends, like 15, 14, whatever. And the second half of the movie, like, Benji is gone. And then we really only get, what's his name? Oxy? Is that how you say it? Oski. That was a very strange name. Oski. He's really just the main friend of the second half. Did you find that too?
It makes sense though, because because Oski's focus is clearly
women,
girls, and Benji. It's established early on that Benji is
freaked out.
And then he's wary of these things. He's sort of the image. I don't want to the less mature, the less worldly
Yeah,
one.
yeah. He's maybe the youngest one. He doesn't really, he's a little nervous about all this stuff. Yeah.
It makes sense that if the two of them are drifting into this world, that they're going to kind of leave him behind there. But
Yeah.
yes, it is interesting. I did notice that Benji just all but kind of disappeared from the
Yeah,
screen.
no, and I'm okay with that. But I felt like, I mean, there's like a heart to heart that he has with his other friend towards the end. I just felt like Benji played enough of a role in the first half. I felt like he should have had one more significant scene of some kind in the second half for
Yeah,
him to just be gone. And they
there
don't
was,
even like, do they even mention him once in the second half? Like,
yeah.
that just felt strange to me. Like they're really introduced as a trio, and then he's just gone. It's not like did he move away? like like if he left, that's one thing, but if he's still there on the island, I felt like that was a strange choice to just have him off screen the whole time.
They just kind of ditched him. I don't know.
They were like almost done with production, and they were like, "Oh crap, we forgot about the third friend." Nobody will notice.
Yeah.
Nobody on a podcast 50 years from now is going to notice that. Come on.
What is a podcast?
What is what do you think and you go back to 70, 71? What is a podcast? They'd be like, radio. The other thing, Mark, that I was a little bit, so this is tricky, right? Because I'm big on point of view, but I felt like since the whole movie is really from Hermie's point of view, I felt like we didn't get to know Dorothy enough. It's all kind of from him. I wanted a couple scenes of her outside of Hermie's perspective almost. Like I felt like I wanted to, she was an interesting character. She's this young war bride. Her husband goes off to war. I wanted to learn more about her. And the whole movie, we're only seeing her through the eyes of this 15-year-old. You know, I don't like if the movie had had 2 or 3 other scenes with Dorothy, not with Hermie, would I have been saying the opposite right now? Like, this movie is from the point of view of Hermie. How dare Mulligan do that? I don't know. But I wanted to get to know her a little bit more. There's parts of this movie where she's just not there. Like he's dating this other girl who's younger, you know, obviously closer to his age, Hermie. And you know, that scene where he's getting condoms, that's like a long 10-15 minute scene. Like it goes on for a long time. I wanted to know Dorothy a little bit more. Did you feel that at all?
I can see that. I think it makes for a more intriguing relationship between them because I think it's from his perspective, so it's from his lens of how he sees her. But I think retaining that mysteriousness about her that you really don't know, she's almost, in a way, she's kind of a blank canvas for him to project his ideals.
This, so I see the other side of it. I'm not saying it needed to do that. She's never came fully to life for me in the movie. And I think part of it was because we're just seeing her through him. I wanted a little bit more like, what is she like? Like away from him, like give me a little bit more. And I feel like in movies you have, like, if you're writing a novel in first person from Hermie's perspective, you can't then go into a scene with Dorothy unless you really were to break that and wanted to have a mix of first and third or something, that maybe, but not very, it's pretty rare that authors do that. In a movie, I feel like you have a little bit more license to like break away from point of view a little bit if you want. This movie doesn't really do that. I mean, do we have a scene from this movie that's not with Hermie? Like, I feel like he's in every scene, right? So, and you know, and that makes sense, and that's a choice. I mean, it's a reflection from middle-aged Hermie looking back, so it wouldn't make sense, I guess, in that respect. It wouldn't make sense to have 10 minutes of the movie be just with her, without him somewhere nearby watching her like creepily from afar. So that's I think with the reflection looking back, I think it has to be she's only there when he's there. But it's still, I wish there would have been a little bit more of her, and maybe even just a couple more scenes with Hermie and her, like earlier in the movie. I don't know. I just felt like she never became 3-dimensional for me. She was always just kind of this like this image of a woman,
and for me,
the ideal woman.
And for me, I think that's part of what made this feel like an older
kind of dull.
But in that it seems like they're trying to, the way that it moves ahead quickly and it jumps from where in I think nowadays, movies are more intentional about we're gonna let characters develop, let relationships between characters develop. Whereas with older movies, everything seems to happen a lot quicker, and it
Oh
goes
yeah.
from him helping her with the groceries to, oh, come inside and have coffee. Everything's
Yeah.
just very, very rushed and very thrown together, which is, I think that's what made me feel like it's an older movie than it was, because
Mm.
that was something that you see in movies from the 30s and the 40s and even in the 50s. Everything is just thrown together. Plot devices are really rushed through, at least from our lens. Everything feels more rushed. So
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. So if you had turned this movie on, Mark, knowing not what year it came out, like what year would you assume it had been made? Like
Oh,
61?
early 60s, I maybe late 50s. I mean, again, the cinematography
The
gives
cinematography you can tell is a little later. Like
right.
you can just the look of the actors and things, you can tell. When you look at like, Rebel Without a Cause from 1956, you can tell the difference of just like the look of the film versus a 71 color movie. There's something about like the film itself that looks different.
Yes.
Like there's how would you describe it? Like a 50s Technicolor movie has a very specific kind of look where you just know, if I'm flipping the channels and I come across Turner Classic Movies and they're showing a 50s film in color, like I don't know what the movie is or who's in it, whatever. I know it's a 50s film. Like boom. There's a look to those films. Yeah.
Yeah, there is.
But I think this movie, if this movie had come out in 1956, not very much would be different about it, right?
Right.
I mean, maybe the condom scene would have been cut.
Oh,
But yeah, Mulligan is not breaking the boundaries of like, R-rated material here. What was this rated? PG? I think PG.
I don't remember.
I think it's PG. Did I read somewhere that like when it came out on video or something, it was rated R momentarily and then it was changed to PG or something weird like that? Like this does not feel like an R-rated movie to me.
But then we also have to like PG back in this time.
Yeah.
They had PG around, right? Because I know that.
Yeah. So early 70s. So at the very beginning, I believe it was G and then M. M was like the PG.
Right.
And then R and then X. Like we're the 4.
Yeah.
And then I can't remember what year PG came into being, but I think it was the 70s at some point. It's now PG. And then X didn't become NC-17 until 1990, till much later.
Yeah.
Because I mean that whole rating is so ridiculous. Nobody releases their movie NC-17. You can't get it. If you're going to release it NC-17 now, you just release it unrated on Netflix or something. Like MA. I don't think people pay attention to ratings very much anymore. Like I don't think people like as long like that. I think parents pay attention to, is it PG-13 or is it R? I think that's it. Because there's like a huge difference.
Yeah, I remember that being, for like when we were growing up, I remember that being crucial. You had to think about,
is it PG-13?
What's it going to be rated? And my parents were, much to my, they were strict about, if it's a PG-13 movie, I will not allow you to go without one of us.
Oh, you could not when you were 13?
Until I was 13.
Oh, okay.
Until I was.
So you're 11, 12. Your parents would not let you go see a PG-13 movie with friends. They would have to go with you.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember that was a whole thing, right? When we were like 15, 16, like, okay, they would not allow you to buy a ticket for an R-rated movie if you were like under 17. Yeah. So you had to kind of like figure out the situation.
That's why you buy a ticket for a movie that isn't rated R.
We never did that, Mark.
Oh, I totally did.
Totally did. Usually you would go with the PG-13 movie, right? You wouldn't walk up and say one for the G-rated animated movie. You would like go with like a PG-13. They're like, okay. I mean, but these multiplexes have tons of screens. They'd have like one person like really checking. So
I mean, unless it was a Disney movie that was rated, that it's like, no, like I want to see this movie. but
Oh
otherwise,
yeah,
we had to make sure that it was a movie that realistically that they were going to see a bunch of 14-year-olds
yeah.
being like, yeah, they would see. Yeah, you're right. If they were going to go see like the latest crap G-rated movie, they were probably looking at you going, we're going to follow them and see if they actually go into that theater.
My favorite memory of something like that was my friend Donald. We were seeing A Simple Plan, an R-rated film with Bill Paxton, directed by Sam Raimi, early '99. And he walks up and he goes, "Yes, hi, a one for a simple plan." And then he stops and he went, not no what just 1 minute. And then he looks up and then I think he turned around, he was like, which one is PG-13? And then the guy inside's like, I'm like, dude, what are you doing? I think we still saw it. I think we still got in because I saw it in the theater. So yeah. You have to be, back then. Do kids still do that now? I mean, obviously not right now because theaters are open where I am, Mark. But here's the deal. Like, I support the theater experience. I'm not going to just go watch anything, right? So the only movies that are coming out right now in theaters are either films by Warner Brothers that are on HBO Max that you can just watch at home, like The Little Things with Denzel Washington, or they're like subpar movies that are just playing that in a normal year I would never go see. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to support the theater experience like to the point where I'm going to go see a movie I have no interest in. It's going to take a really great movie in the months to come that is only in theaters, can't watch it at home.
Yeah,
I know it's coming. It's coming, but still a few months out.
I just don't want to sit there for
2 hours with a mask on.
Mask on, no, thank you. I'd rather just do it at home. I mean,
that's the key. Yeah. As soon as like, if we have to wear a mask in the theater, that's just going to put a lot of people off. Yeah. So you would not go see Summer of 42 in a theater wearing a mask for 2 hours? That would not be a deal for you?
Definitely not. Absolutely not.
If they do a 50th anniversary re-release, you won't be there.
Nope.
All right, so a couple more things about the movie. So Robert Mulligan, the director. So we've talked about him a little bit. Like, what did he bring to this movie? Anything at all that you liked about his directing in this, Mark? Anything that he did as a director, or are you just not happy with this guy?
Well, I do like, as we had talked about a little bit ago, I do like the choices that were made with the perspective, and I like that it was told from his point of view.
Okay.
And likewise that, even though we don't know too much about Dorothy, that I do think, yeah, obviously that was intentional, and I do like that aspect of it. And I also think that it was meant to be this, I think especially with putting in his interactions with the girls his age.
Yeah, in the movie theater. Great scene in the movie theater.
And then the movie theater, and then when they go and they're hanging out
at the beach
with the bonfire, and then the interactions that he has with Dorothy. I think I do like the choices that were made there, because it's meant to, my takeaway from it was it's meant to put up this idealized, this is what adult romance looks like, and this is, he's clearly trying to push himself into that dimension. Yeah. And even the point when he's all dressed up and he's heading out to go over to Dorothy's house after he's painted his shoes. Is it glue or is it paint that he puts on his? I couldn't remember.
Yeah,
it looked glue. I don't know, but he's trying to make his shoes look whiter, and then he runs into Oski, and Oski's talking to him, and you could just totally tell that Hermie is just like, I don't have time for this. I'm going on being out with a woman. Like, I'm not interested in your adolescent shenanigans. So he's clearly trying to fit him. He's trying to push himself ahead on the growth. He's trying to make himself more grown up than he actually is. So I think those choices, those seem like directorial choices, and I like that. I think it really adds that dimension of, and we can all relate to it when you're at that age, and the last thing that you want to do at that age is be treated like a kid. You want to be even though you're 15, you want to be treated like you're older. I thought he captured that element well. Everything at 15 feels so big and monumental, and like, this is going to change everything, and it's like, it feels that way. Everything is the end of the world at that age. Everything is life-changing, crucial, and And then you get to our age and you just go,
and you're like, what's on Netflix?
then you get to our age and you just like, when you want nothing more than to be an adult at that age, then you get to our age and you just, maybe this is just me, but you're just like, what I would kill to be at that age and
for a day,
have a fraction of the responsibility that I have now.
Yeah, I remember that being talked about when I was like a teenager, like just, enjoy this, because when you're older, you have a lot of responsibility and you have to pay bills, you have to do this and that. And I'd be like, yeah. And now it's true. It's like, okay, you have to have like a job. And when you have like, oh, I might get health benefits, that becomes the story of the year. That's not something I was thinking about when I was 15. Oh my gosh, I can go to the dentist again. But yeah, I just thought he captured that element well. Right. It's just a beautiful looking movie. And I felt like the movies, I mean, I know it might have bored you more than did me, but I thought the movie was paced fairly well. I like that it's not just all him pining after this older woman. That could have been the whole movie. I like that we get these kind of moments of comedy of them fighting on the beach at the beginning, and then they're at the movie theater, and they're like trying to put their arm around the girl.
Yeah, absolutely.
And which, I mean, there's some relatable things going on in this movie. I love that the movie they're watching is now Voyager, starring Betty Davis. Since this year, 2021, I am doing a year of Betty Davis movies. I'm on 1935. I'm going to get to Now Voyager just in a few weeks. So I've been like full in on Betty Davis since January. So to see her like in this movie, it just reminded me of like.
Is there a anniversary for Betty Davis this year? Or was it just
Oh no, it was just so every year I pick an actor or an actress and I watch 52 of their films over the course of a year, so one movie a week. And last year I did Joan Crawford. I'd only seen 3 of her films and she made like 60, 70 movies. Yeah. So I did a year of Crawford. And one of my favorite TV projects of the last 5 years was Feud, Betty and Joan on FX with Jessica Lange and Susan Sarandon. Yeah. Loved every second of it. Yeah. And I was like, ooh, what if I made this a 2-year kind of fun little game of, little thing where I'm watching Crawford, then Davis. And the idea is on New Year's Day, Mark, 2022. This is how big of a nerd I am. New Year's Day 2022, I'm gonna watch Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which I did not. That's the only one I didn't watch for Crawford, and I won't watch it this year either for Davis. And I'll watch. That'll be the conclusion of 2 years. And then I think my little epilogue after that will be to watch Feud, Betty and Joan again, which was so great.
Are you going to watch Mommy? Did you watch Mommy Dearest?
I did. I that's funny you asked that, because I went back and forth, because that is a movie that does not paint Joan Crawford in a good light. But I'd only seen it once in high school, and I really didn't remember it outside of the wire hanger scene. And I was like, I kind of want to look at it again. It's actually a really boring, dull movie. Like, it's 2.5 hours long. There's long stretches of just like, okay, like it is not a great film. I think in the hands of a better director, that movie would have been a different kind of, like, I think Faye Dunaway does a great job with what she's given, but the movie, and she talked about this on Inside the Actors Studio with James Lipton, where she felt like the director didn't modulate the tone very well. So there's a lot of just high pitched like screaming in so many scenes, and there's not like really a vision to like put it all together in a movie that has like cohesion. So it needed a half-hour cut off. Like it needed some more editing work or something. I don't know.
Maybe a little more nuance. It's very heavy. It seems like it's very heavy on the camp and like that's what it's best known for, is the histrionics that she goes through. It's not really known.
So I watched it, and I think I made myself watch it like the night before I watched one of her best films, which I believe was Sudden Fear from 52, which was amazing. One of her Oscar nominated roles. So I was like, okay, if I'm gonna watch Mommy Dearest, Brian, the next day we're gonna watch a really good Crawford film, because I don't want this to be stained in my memory for the next 2 weeks. I want like a good Crawford vehicle. I love that we, in the course of a few minutes, we went from they're watching Now Voyager in summer of 42 to talking about Mommy Dearest and Faye Dunaway. That's great. I love it. But Mommy Dearest, yeah, not one of my favorites. But yeah, Joan Crawford, Betty Davis. Now Voyager came out in 42, so I'll be watching that film in a few weeks. So it was kind of nice to see like, oh, the movie they're watching is one I'm going to be watching in a few weeks. And just based on that scene or 2 scenes that they showed in Summer 42, I was like, ooh, this is pretty good. I was worried that they were showing the very last scene of Now Voyager because like the camera like tilted up. I was like, oh, don't give it away. Not yet. Let me see it first. Yeah. So yeah, I like the movie theater scene. And as I said, the scene where he's buying condoms, I just thought that was very well staged and paced. Like I was laughing really hard at that scene. I don't know about you. I found that scene like, not that I've ever done that, but like I thought like we really have come to know Herbie by now, and like he really wants to get this, but he's scared, and I felt like that was kind of a relatable moment, and the way that the suspense just kept getting dragged on, like finally he might get it, but oh, they're too expensive. He doesn't have enough money, and I thought that was a nice sequence. Yeah, I just, I mean, there's nothing, I feel like there's nothing Robert Mulligan's doing here. There's nothing he's doing that's really unique or out of the ordinary or, incredibly cinematic. And, but I felt like for this story, I feel like he was the right choice to tell it. I think he did a good job. And then performances, Mark, what do you think of the lead performance, by the boy who played Hermie? I didn't look up his name. I should have. The actor's name. The 15-year-old who played Hermie, he probably was a little older than that.
Gary Grimes.
Gary Grimes.
Gary Grimes.
What did we think of his performance? Did you think he was not charismatic enough to carry a whole movie?
I did like him.
Yeah.
I would say I did like him. I thought he looked the age, looked the part.
Yeah, he didn't look 27 playing 15. That was nice.
He was very believable. He filled in those, he embodied all of those complexities and nuances that come with being that age. So I like
I'm glad that he's the boy we follow for the whole movie. I think the two friend actors, as great as they are in their roles, like I don't know if I would have wanted to follow either of them for 2 hours. Yeah. I think we had the right actor and the right character there. I mean, he's a pretty strong actor in this. Him crying at the end actually was kind of surprised. Like I thought that was kind of moving at the very end when he gets tears when they're dancing, and he's a pretty solid actor. I don't know if he'd done anything before this, anything of merit, or of note. But yeah, I mean, I thought he did a fine job.
I agree.
Yeah, and then the boys who play the friends are solid. Like Oski is wonderfully. Like annoying at times. I thought that actor was pretty effective in that role too. And the actress who played Dorothy, do you have her name in front of you? Jennifer O'Neill, who played Dorothy. Yeah. Strikingly gorgeous. I mean, you can see why he's smitten with her. And I mean, again, I wanted to know that character a little bit more, but for what she's supposed to do, I thought she did a fine job.
I thought so too, for being sort of one-dimensional. And as I said before, for being sort of a projection of his own wants and desires, I thought she was effective. But you also noticed that there are certain things about her that kind of make you go, I don't know, there is some depth to her that is a little more subtle, I think, because there are some things, I think, well, especially with that last scene where, even before then, even when she invites him to have coffee, when she asks for help for putting the boxes up in the attic. I don't want to say that she's kind of using him, but
especially when we find out kind of what she's going through.
Right.
Towards the end. Even before we learn kind of what happens to her husband, like she's definitely. She's not like kind of rolling her eyes at this kid, like, gosh, get away from me. It's like, he's like, hey, I'd love to see you again. And she's like, oh yeah. Or does she say that to him? I can't remember. Like, maybe she says it first. Like she says, I would love to see you again. Come by. It's not like she's not like pushing him away at any point. Like she's like, yeah, come by.
Which is, how desperate is she for connection? And
how old is she supposed to be? Like early 20s?
Early 20s, I would guess.
Yeah. And she's like, perfectly happy with his 15-year-old just coming by and like having coffee. That's kind of strange.
It's interesting.
I don't know. I got the sense that there's not a whole lot of people on this island, right? It's not like she's got a bunch of girlfriends around.
No.
So
clearly she's lonely if she's willing
She's
to
very lonely.
yeah.
But yeah, I think I don't know like what amounted to her career, but she has a great look, and does a good job with her character. I'd like to see her in more films. Apparently she's not in the sequel, so maybe find her in other stuff. Any other scenes? I mean, we can kind of we don't have to give away everything, but let's talk a little bit about the ending of this movie. So I thought it ended a little bit too abruptly, right? So they have this night together, and spoiler alert, now's the time to fast forward. He leaves, he comes back the next day, and she's left him this letter, and she leaves. What does she say? I've decided to go home. Which I don't know where home is. I'm assuming that's like her hometown, like where she grew up.
Right.
But we learn at the end, which Mark and I talked about before we started recording, her husband died in war. Mm-hmm. And I did not pick that up in the movie. Like, I didn't know that until I read the synopsis after watching it. I was like, oh, did she say that? Like, I guess we're supposed to assume when she's crying and she's smoking, and then he almost starts crying when they're dancing. Like, I feel like you could take that as just she really, really, really misses her husband. I didn't take that as, oh, he's dead. Was that obvious to you?
Not blatantly obvious, but I think you can kind of put the pieces together. But at the same time, it could also have been, for all we know, it could have just been a moment of weakness and
loneliness. He could have written her a letter that says, I've got another 2 years. Like, I won't be home. Like, I mean, we don't want her to say to Hermie, like, he's dead. Right. But like, I feel like there was a way to get that information across a little bit clearer. I didn't catch that.
I think the letter that he finds makes it more like because she does say, I've gone back home, and she says there are a lot of things that I need to do. So I think you sort of assume that she went back home, maybe you make funeral arrangements, had no reason to be there.
Yeah.
He was not going to come back. So
yeah, the idea is she got the news like right before Hermie came over. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So,
but yeah.
They don't make it blatantly obvious that.
So that was also kind of strange, because I was like, wait, what? I try to watch, especially for the podcast, Mark, I'm trying to watch these movies really closely. And that part, I was like, did I glance at my phone for 10 seconds? Like, I missed it. Like, did she like hold up something? He's dead. I don't know. So yeah, I thought that could have come across a little bit clearer, but it like, there's not a real sense of catharsis at the end. It just kind of like ends. He's like, he reads the letter. He's had this night with her. And then the voiceover comes in, and that was my summer of 42. And I'm like, it's funny because I had issues with the ending of Love Story too, right? I felt like the ending of that movie was too rushed. I wanted to really be there with her with her illness. And this one, it also felt kind of rushed at the end. I'm like, for a movie that really takes its time, I was like, I don't know. It felt like there was a scene or two missing at the end. It just didn't quite land for me.
Yeah. And that's what makes me feel like this is an older movie. We're gonna wrap things up, put a bow on it, even if it doesn't feel finished, they're sort of going, well, and that's the conclusion of our story. And that's how it all.
Oh yeah. Voiceover is tricky. Sometimes it works. This time, it was like when the voiceover of the older guy comes in, and now let me give you a final lesson as the credits roll. I'm like, no.
I felt, here's what, okay, I since we're talking about the ending, I liked when he's standing there after he reads her letter and realizes that she's gone, and he's standing at the fence looking out and just lost in his own thoughts. And then Oski comes over beside him, and they're talking with him, and Oski's really trying to be a friend for him and to say, if there's anything you want to talk about, you can tell me. And I thought that was actually a very tender moment on his part. For most of the movie,
you're right, because he's kind of like the comic relief banter character. He's always kind of digging into his friends, and that's like the one moment in the whole movie where Oski actually says something of kind of merit to him, like something that's helpful. He actually can like see him, like it's not just, giving him, a punch in the shoulder. And it's actually like a tender moment between the two.
I like that part, and I felt like it would have ended perfectly if it had just been when he's sitting on the beach and then the voiceover comes in.
Mhm.
If there had been no voiceover, if it had just zoomed out or
Mm.
blacked out on him just sitting there on the beach
Yeah,
looking out the water,
yeah, that might have been better.
that would have been a better way
Because
to
Love
close it.
Story doesn't Love Story open with a little bit of voiceover for Ryan O'Neal? Like
Yes.
she would be dead at age 25, or
Yeah.
but there's no
Yep.
voiceover at the end of the movie, right? Was there voiceover at the end of Love Story?
I can't remember.
I'm like 87%
But
sure
it,
there was
ends,
not.
but it does end with the same scene that it started with him sitting on the bleachers of that
Yeah, yeah,
field
yeah.
in the snow.
Which, yeah, a lot of films do that, right? They
Yeah,
open and end with the same image. But
right.
yeah, I think maybe like a little bit less of the voice. It came on a little bit thick at the end of this one. I'm like, okay, he just
Yeah.
read this letter. We
Got
get it.
it.
We
Yeah.
get it. We don't need this extra voiceover to, as you did a fine job, Mr. Mulligan.
Older movies were not so subtle, and older movies were
Yeah.
really kind of we're going to lay it, they were a little heavy-handed with their presentation. I felt like, again, I'm coming back to this whole, it felt like an older movie than a 1971 movie, partially because of that, because they were
So
really
yeah. So
getting it.
Mark, so this came out in early 71. This is a really exciting time for cinema. Lots of cool things are happening. Why
Yes.
does this film that feels very old-fashioned, why does this become the fourth highest grossing movie of the year? What do you think?
I think, well, I think Love Story probably had a lot to do with
Do you
it.
think it really, because so Love Story was 4 months before this. Do you think
Yeah.
it was riding the Love Story train of people just desperate? I've seen Love Story 76 times.
Mm-hmm.
There's a new Love Story coming to town in summer 42. Do you think some of it was that?
Probably. And then also keeping in mind that, and we talked about this during the Love Story podcast, was that the only way you didn't have a way of rewatching these movies unless they were shown on TV or
Yeah.
re-released in the theater a few years later. There was no home video.
There was no home video in early 70s. Yeah.
So unless you went and saw multiple repeats of Love Story, maybe there was something in there that said, well, if it seems like it's similar to Love Story, then I'm gonna go watch it to kind of get that fix that I'm not able to get from being able to go and bring Love Story home with me. I don't know. That's my theory.
Yeah, I think Love Story played a big role in that. I think if the book was a runaway bestseller in summer 42, that probably played a role. And
yeah.
I mean, looking at the schedule, there's not a whole lot of like major films between like January and May of 71. So it's not like there was a huge marketplace of big blockbusters by any means in early 71. So this was probably the one that just struck a chord.
And maybe to put it in an even broader context, 71, thinking of what was going on politically, what was going on now.
This is Vietnam era.
Vietnam, Nixon is an
Nixon.
I think maybe people were enchanted by this throwback to simpler times, 30 years before, for those people that were alive to remember the war years. Maybe there was some kind of a nostalgia.
They wanted nostalgia of a safer time, of a happier time of the 40s. Yeah, like a month before this movie comes out, we get George Lucas's debut as a feature film director in THX 1138. And that's a very dark, kind of abstract science fiction movie, which just tanks, right? Just nobody went and saw his first film.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like this nostalgic love story, they're like, we're on board. This is what we want to see, And
a movie, like I've said it so many times already, that feels like an older movie in terms of, it's not really trying to push boundaries or, really trying to push the envelope cinematically. That maybe
it appeals to everybody, right? So any like I feel like 15-year-olds, girls and boys would have wanted to see this. And then I feel like, people in their 80s would have wanted to see this. It appeals to like every age range.
A solid crowd pleaser, I think.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So my last question about the movie, Mark, is we can talk about the ending too with this part. If this movie were made today, what would be different about it? 2021, someone's remaking Summer of 42.
Oh,
how does it look different? Do we just not make the movie, Mark?
I mean, if they made the move with the same story, I mean, there's no beating around the bush here with the fact that there is something problematic in 2021.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Looking at the older woman having this relationship with a teenage boy. there's no getting around that. And
Mhm.
so I think if they were to make this movie now, they would have to throw in something of a, they couldn't make it this, oh, kind of wistful romantics. No, there would be
She would be 17 and he would be 12 or 13 or something. Maybe they'd be younger.
there would have to be some kind of there would have to be some kind of reckoning with it, or there would have to be some kind of really profound dramatic element to it to not romanticize that real, because I think romanticizing that relationship the way that
This
movie,
film does would
it
not
would not fly.
fly.
It would not fly.
10 years ago it wouldn't fly, right? So this is definitely a product of its time, which
Yeah.
is the nature of the beast with this podcast. I'd say at least 50% of the movies I've looked at since middle of 1970, there are at least one or two problematic areas where it's like, yeah, that would not fly in 2021. And
Right.
this is definitely one of those. I mean, this is definitely the romantic tone of this film would not work today. And so you'd have to find another way in, or change, or make the characters younger or something. I don't know.
I don't know.
But yeah, it wouldn't. I feel like in the 70s, maybe the 80s, this could kind of work. But I feel like now, I don't know what would happen with it. A story like a love story, which we talked about last time, that could have an update now, and not a whole lot would change.
But like
But
you pointed out in the Love Story podcast, that there would have to be some element, whether it was like an interracial couple or maybe a queer couple, there would have to be something in there to turn that. And so with this one, there would have to, like I said, there would have to be some kind of, like I said, there would have to be some kind of reckoning or some kind of,
if it was about a teenage boy and a woman in her 20s, the approach would have to be a lot different, and they would have to really reckon, as you say, with that right. premise. It couldn't just be romantic, nostalgic. That wouldn't fly. Yeah. So they would have to do something about it. Anything else about do you think the pacing would there be more comedy? Would there be a faster pace to it? I don't know. I feel like that could ruin it if it was like made to be too modern. I don't know. But like, I'm trying to think, are there any films made now that are about the 40s? Like, I mean, there might be some I just can't think of off the top of my head. Like, we watched Mank recently, the story of the making of Citizen Kane and that screenwriter's career in Hollywood. That was, I believe, set in the 30s all the way up until 40, 41. Mm-hmm. And that, I mean, that really, one of the things I liked about that movie, I had some problems with Mank. But I really liked the way it, it captured that time, the 30s and early 40s. I thought that was handled well. But in terms of like a coming of age film, I don't really know how a director would do that now. Whether it was about this story or some other story, like a nostalgic piece set in the 40s over a summer made today, I don't really know what that would be.
Yeah. Not sure either.
Mark's like, just whatever it is, make it better.
Make it more.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you for taking a look at this movie. I'm sorry you didn't have a better time. I want my guests to have a good time. So I promise next time we will do like an action or horror film. We'll do something a little different.
I'm happy to talk. I like that there were layers to this movie, instead of just saying I've got nothing to say about this movie. So it wasn't
that episode is coming. I know I'm going to have a guest. Like, I thought that was going to be actually Ryan's Daughter, a movie that I mentioned before that was 3.5 hours long, and it was like, is my guest just going to yell at me for an hour? But I know that episode is coming where a guest is just like, it was okay. I mean, it was fine. Silence. So I'm trying to pick films of merit, right, that have something going for it, that were popular at the time, that got good reviews. I'm trying not to pick something that's just like and I could probably stop myself if I'm halfway through a film and I'm like this is not. I feel like it's okay to talk about bad films, but
for sure,
I want to come into the conversation with something to say. All right, so our final two segments, Mark, on Summer of 42. Our first one is the Divine Double Feature. So did you pick a film, a more modern film that could be kind of like a neat double feature? If someone were to finish Summer 42 and had time to watch one more film, what would be like something more modern that could go with this pretty well?
This was interesting. I came up with two films.
Okay.
But although You did mention one earlier in the podcast. I won't, in case that was something that you would have picked, but as soon as you mentioned this particular film, that made me go, oh, that would have been a good companion piece with
Call
it.
Me by Your Name.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But
That was one of my ideas. Yeah.
okay, so, but the ones that I picked, and they're both dramatically different films from each other. And so I'll have to hear me out on them. So the first one that I picked, more serious, more dramatic, and the reason that it had uh, a similar arrangement with a younger, teenage boy getting involved romantically and sexually with a slightly older woman.
Okay.
Thinking of The Reader. With,
Right. Yeah. With Kate Winslet.
Yeah. So, obviously very different. I mean, this movie is about, a woman who is being tried for war crimes in post-Nazi Germany.
Yeah. But same decade, right? Isn't The Reader set in the 40s?
Yeah. Same decade, World War II era, same time period. And, but
that's a great choice.
Yeah.
I've only seen it once. I've only seen it one time. I should check it out again. It's been a while. It's been 13 years.
Movie, and rightfully, she well deserved. Kate Winslet finally won that Best Actress Oscar. So many
it was coming, right? She was going to get it for something.
She holds the record, if I'm not mistaken, for the most female nominations without a win. I want to say
maybe then. Right now, it's Glenn Close at 7. Glenn Close has 7 Oscar nominations.
I think at the time she held that record for the most nominations without a win.
Yeah, Kate Winslet was nominated for Sense and Sensibility, Titanic, Iris, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and Little Children. So 6 nominations. Yeah, so and then that was a crazy time because she had 2 big dramatic performances in 2008. She had not just The Reader, but Revolutionary Road with DiCaprio again. And at the Golden Globes, she won for both. She won for Revolutionary Road in lead actress and The Reader in supporting.
Yeah.
So that was strange.
But then at the Oscars, she was moved into the leading.
I guess at the Oscars, they just thought that really both performances were lead, and you are not. So actors cannot be nominated twice in the same category at the Oscars. You can be nominated for lead actress for one movie and supporting actors for another, but you can't get 2 leads in the same category. Unlike like directors, right? Like Steven Soderbergh was nominated twice in the year 2000 for Traffic and Aaron Brockovich. Actors, they have to. That's why I always go back to 2004 when Jamie Foxx was nominated for lead actor for Ray, which he won, and then he got supporting actor for Collateral, a movie he's in every scene of. I was like, wait, what? That's not a supporting performance.
And it's all about, which movie do we think is really gonna, we're gonna really throw this Oscar campaign behind. And that's the one that is, which, I mean, for Ray, that makes, biopic, transformative, and anytime an actor has to adopt kind of a transformative, playing someone else, I mean, playing a well-known person, I think they'll usually throw their weight behind that. And I'm glad that in Kate Winslet's case, I'm glad that they threw their Oscar weight behind The Reader, because I mean, she was great in Revolutionary.
Yeah, it was a little bit more of an Oscar baity movie than Revolutionary Road. That was a little bit more of a disturbing kind of character study. I feel like if she was going to win for one, it was going to be for The Reader. Yeah. So that made sense at the time. Although I'm still bummed that God, Meryl Streep was so great in Doubt that year. That's such an astonishing performance, one of her best.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes me sad that the movie she would win for later in her career is The Iron Lady, which is a movie I don't like very much. I kind of wish it's it's just a matter of that was the timing. I feel like if Kate Winslet had not had a movie release in 2008, I think Meryl Streep would have won her 3rd Oscar that year. But who knows? I think Kate Winslet was one of those actors. It was coming at some point. And now the question becomes, Mark, Glenn Close, who I mentioned before, is getting Oscar buzz for Hillbilly Elegy for Best Supporting Actress, which would be her 8th nomination. A movie that I liked more than others, but it's not like her strongest film. She's really great in it. So, at some point you have to say, well, even if the movie's not the greatest of the year, if it's a really strong performance, she's been nominated 7 times. It's not a really competitive field this year, Mark, for supporting actress. Might it be Glenn Close's time? I don't know.
And there comes a point when an actor has received so many nominations that you kind of that when they finally do get that win, like especially if it's a long time coming, like Kate Winslet, like Leonardo DiCaprio, because he also went a long time without getting a win after having multiple nominations. And I remember that some people were thinking when he won for The Revenant, and some people were going, well, should this have been the movie that he won for?
Yeah, or, I think that was a good one.
Yeah, I remember there were some arguments saying there were other previous roles that he absolutely should have won for in Revenant. While obviously he was great in it, is that really the movie that he gets the Oscar for? As opposed to just being like, you know what, the time has finally come. I think for Kate Winslet, The Reader, absolutely, yes. I think that is a justifiable role.
Okay. Because usually, Mark, when it's an overdue actor, they do not win for the right movie, right? Paul Newman for The Color of Money, Al Pacino for Scent of a Woman. Usually it's like, oops, we forgot to give this to you 20 years ago. Yeah. Usually they don't win for the right role. Even my favorite, Sandra Bullock, I think she should have won for Gravity. That's her best film performance, not The Blind Side. But hey, she's got an Oscar, so that's kind of cool. All right, what's your other one?
So The Reader was my pick, like I said, based on the relationship aspect of what was in.
Boy, they're in for a fun-filled night with those two movies, right, Mark?
Right. Oh yeah.
Summer of 42 and The Reader. Get your popcorn out.
And when you said that you've only seen The Reader the one time, I was going to say, well, it's not a movie. It's a heavy movie. It's a very heavy movie. It's not a movie that you just want to be like, I want to watch that again.
I would actually like to know, what am I into this podcast 5 months now? Email me at 50 years ago in film @gmail.com. Has anybody taken any of these double feature recommendations? Let me know. I want to know if any of you out there sit down with Summer of 42 and The Reader. Let me know.
Let us know how it goes.
How does it go? All right, what was the other one?
Let us know how much you need to drink afterward. Okay, so the other one, this is kind of out of left field, but I base this one
Mars Attacks
more on the relationship. No, not great. But I base this one more on the relationship with the friends.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Superbad.
Oh, Superbad. Makes sense.
Michael Cera and Jonah Hill.
Yeah. Emma Stone's breakthrough.
Stone's breakthrough role because of the dynamic, teenage boys. There's only 2 of them instead of the 3, but teenage boys who are obsessed with getting laid and losing their, and many similar, like they're talking about just like the boys in Summer 42 are obsessed with that book, that medical book, and they're taking tips out of it. And, they're obsessed with, watching porn and things like that. so that's, like I said, might be a bit of a stretch, but it was that dynamic between the friends and teenage boys at that age are thinking of. That's what made me think. And the thing, as I said earlier, as much as I'm not really into those kinds of coming of age, boys being crass and horny, like Superbad, I genuinely did like. I thought it was really, I thought it was really well done. It was clever. The actors are great. I laughed my head off.
Yeah, I saw Superbad at like an early screening. I can't remember how we got tickets to that. It was like a week or 2 before it came out, and it was just every seat was taken. Just packed theater. Boy, there is nothing like a really crowded theater for a comedy and everyone's into it. There's nothing like it. Bridesmaids was another example. Crowded theater for Bridesmaids.
Yeah. Those are the kinds of movies that you want to see with people. Yeah,
Superbad's a great idea. Yeah, so it could be a triple feature, maybe put Superbad in between. It did technically come out a year before The Reader, so
07. Or maybe watch Summer 42 and The Reader, and then to and
then 6 months later, then watch Summer 42 followed by Superbad. Yeah, so it's funny. I actually didn't write it down. I think I thought of it yesterday, but I think Call Me by Your Name is a choice that makes sense, right? Doesn't it take place over a summer?
Takes place summer.
Also a little problematic, right? He's like what, 16, 17, and then
Oliver is 24, I believe.
And then Armie Hammer. That's a discussion for another day, as I'm sure I've been reading the news about him, but I don't know what the legacy of Call Me by Your Name
head around that whole. I still don't understand I just know that
what is happening?
Understand it.
Just put your head down.
Yeah, he's in trouble, and I don't
Stay
know.
off of social media.
Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how I mean, we'll see what happens in the next few years with him, but I don't know if that's going to stain the legacy of Call Me by Your Name, which is a film I really loved back in 2017. But it is a story of young love in the summer. What does it take place in, like 82 in is it France or Italy? Italy, right? And such a great breakthrough performance by Chalamet in that.
Yeah.
But my choice was, did you see from 2013 The Way Back?
No.
Which is a coming of age comedy set over a summer. Like a kid gets a job at the local like water park, and it's a great ensemble cast. Speaking of having the parents of the teenager play a significant role in the movie, I mean, you have such amazing actors in that, like Sam Rockwell and Allison Janney and Toni Collette, and this incredible ensemble cast. It's a lot more of like a bouncy kind of funny movie than Summer of 42 is, but it's also the same kind of story of like a nostalgic, like looking back at this kid. And I think he's like 14, it might be even 15 in the movie, spending a summer away from home. And it has some similarities with Summer of 42, but definitely feels much more like a modern comedy, right? While not going into the hijinks of like a Superbad. It's still like, it all feels like realistic. It's not like ever going for like big crazy jokes or anything. But I feel like it's a movie that kind of came and went. It got some awards buzz at the end of 2013, and then that never amounted to anything. I remember at the end of 2013, I was big online saying, like, don't forget Sam Rockwell and Allison Janney in The Way Back. Supporting actors, do it. Yeah. Crickets, Mark. I was sad. And then 4 years later, Sam Rockwell wins Best Supporting Actor for 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Yeah. And Allison Janney wins Best Supporting Actress for I, Tonya in the same year, in the same ceremony. I was like, and I think that night I was tweeting like, oh, okay. It just took you 4 years to hear me.
Justice was served eventually.
Justice was eventually served. So yeah, I would recommend a great double feature with this would be The Way Back from 2013. All right, our final segment. I always like to wrap up with a little discussion on the director or an actor from the film. Since none of the actors in this movie I'm very familiar with, let's just talk briefly about Robert Mulligan, who had as I said before, a long career in film and TV, going all the way back to the 1950s, and his final film released in 1991. You've seen 2 of them, you said? You've seen Man in the Moon and To Kill a Mockingbird. What are your memories of those 2 films?
To Kill a Mockingbird, I mean, is a classic, obviously, but I remember it, watching it in middle school after reading To Kill a Mockingbird. And then once you finally go through that unit, and the teacher would give you, all right, we're going to take, the next 3 days off and just watch the movie in class, divide it out. So that, it was kind of nice. But even then, like, I do remember thinking, even at that age, that, this was a really great movie. And obviously Gregory Peck is probably his most iconic role.
His Oscar-winning role, iconic. It's hard. I mean, if you're familiar with the movie at all, when you think Atticus Finch, like I think Gregory Peck, like that's who I think when you say that. That's what a lot of us think of.
Inextricably linked to that role, absolutely.
Kind of amazing to think. I was thinking about this the other day. I think looking at Robert Mulligan's career and stuff, I was like, wow, nobody has made a new version of To Kill a Mockingbird as a movie since 1962. That's almost 60 years ago. I'm kind of surprised that there hasn't been, even for television, even like a mini series for Netflix. You think someone by now, 60 years on, would have done they've done it obviously for the stage. Aaron Sorkin, right, adapted it into a stage play with, I think Jeff Daniels was Atticus Finch for a long time on Broadway. Got a Tony Award nomination, I believe. So they've done it on stage. I'm kind of surprised that in 60 years there hasn't been another film or television adaptation.
Maybe people don't want to touch it. Maybe it's
so iconic, like a Casablanca or some of these like real classic films. It's like, well, what do we do with this? Like, leave it be.
But it would be interesting to see it made or readapted in the post, within the next few years, given all of the conversations and the events happening around race relations.
About race relations, yeah.
I feel like there could be an opportunity to really
Mm-hmm.
adapted. And because there has been a lot of criticisms. I know.
Yeah, I think there's been a movement by people in the last couple of years, like get To Kill a Mockingbird out of the required reading in high school. Like I
I know
think
that
there's a movement to like we need to move past this.
there's been a reassessment of, I mean, Atticus Finch really had this image for a long time as being, sort of this champion, the kind of a hero, the white hero
Mm-hmm.
of this time period.
Yeah,
But then
yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I know that with the sequel to or sort of
Oh gosh, don't even get me started on that.
I know that I think I haven't read it, but
Go Set a Watchman, which is the first draft of To Kill a Mockingbird.
Okay.
That they just published.
That gives that kind of paints Atticus Finch in a more
a darker light, yeah.
And actually
negative light.
He wasn't as tolerant, and he wasn't as, this heroic figure as he's made out to be in To Kill a Mockingbird. And that's caused kind of a reassessment of his value as a literary character.
Yeah, I think there's something there. I think there's a possibility for a new adaptation. But as you say, the 1962 version is almost perfect. I mean, it's just such a beautiful film, black and white. I love black and white films from the 60s. There's just such a great look to those movies. Like any black and white film you look at that came out between like 60 and 67, like they're just so striking. And by 62, most movies were in color, so they could have shot this in color. I like that Mulligan didn't. He gave it that black and white quality. It actually gives it a more like nostalgic feel and kind of a timeless feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be my favorite would be To Kill a Mockingbird easily. I mean, if there was one of his films I would want to go back and look at again now, it'd be that one. I haven't seen that movie in many, many years. I do have the Blu-ray. I got the Blu-ray, I think, for cheap, like 7-8 years ago. I think I might have watched it just the once because there's some great bonus material on the Blu-ray, like a making of the movie. The other, so I've seen Clara's Heart. That's the one with Whoopi Goldberg and I believe Neil Patrick Harris. I saw it once a while back. It's like a drama. I liked it, but it hasn't really stuck with me, that one. The other two that have stuck with me more are The Man in the Moon and Up the Down Staircase. So my number 3 pick would be Up the Down Staircase. That's where Sandy Dennis plays a teacher in an inner city school, right? So it's not a story. I mean, it's a story we've seen often, especially since, right? Films like Dangerous Minds and Freedom Riders with Hilary Swank. It's kind of one of those where this white teacher played by Sandy Dennis from Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, she gets a job at the school, and also about race relations. Really well done. I remember really enjoying it. I love movies about teachers, so I enjoyed it for that. Great lead performance. I feel like not a lot of people know about that one, but check it out. It's called Up the Down Staircase from the late 60s. And then my second favorite would be probably the first film I saw of his, which was The Man in the Moon with Reese Witherspoon from 91, his final film and her first film. I remember seeing that on TV when I was 6 or 7 or 8, very, very young. I remember the scene of the boy she loves being killed by that lawnmower, like really just disturbing me when I was a kid. Spoiler alert. But that's the part that I remember. What do you remember about The Man in the Moon? Have you seen that in a long time or?
In a long time, but remember.
You're like I was 5.
Like a period. Kind of similar to Summer 42, like period, right?
Like a kind of a nostalgic kind of coming of age of a girl played by Reese Witherspoon, like over a summer, probably, right? Like, isn't it? I think it takes place in the past. Isn't it like the 50s or 60s or something? I don't think it's set in 91. I think it's like a period film. Yeah.
Rural, like somewhere in the South, like Alabama, Mississippi, something like that.
Yeah. Had a great sense of place. Obviously, you could tell in her first performance that Witherspoon was going to have an amazing career, if she were to pick the right roles. And, after Man in the Moon, she had some questionable, I think, films when she was like really young, but then we get Fear. Well, Fear, 96 was the year of Fear. Yeah. And that was kind of her breakthrough on like a studio level, like a major film that a lot of people went to see. Yeah. But that was also the first film she did that I really took notice of her, and that was Freeway from 96, where she plays a much different kind of character, the one with Kiefer Sutherland.
Yes.
I actually got to work with the director of that movie when I was when I was working in casting in 2008, 2009. The director of Freeway, Mark, was casting a film called The Manson Girls.
Oh,
And it's a movie that never got made, but we worked with him for, I want to say, 3 months. And we had like 10 auditions of all these, up and coming actresses at the time, like circa like 08, 09, come in. Like Brittany Snow came in to read.
oh wow.
Who else? There were some big names. And like we went after Britney Spears for like a month. Like we offered her the lead. And like there was like a back and forth. There was some like talk about it, and then it didn't happen.
And this would have been what time?
This was
08?
like 2008.
Oh,
So I started. Yeah, it was the fall of 2008 when this was happening.
years at that. Oh, she was just coming out of her.
That was the casting director and the director wanted to get kind of like a unique kind of name for the lead, and they were thinking, what about Britney Spears? She had just done the one movie, right? What was that called? Like Crossroads.
That would have been. I'm a huge Britney Spears fan, by the way.
Yeah, no, there was like talk with the representatives. It was back and forth for a couple months. I don't think I might be that might be the first time anyone in this world has heard that story. I don't think it's talked about.
I'm assuming this is about the girls.
Yeah, it was like the Manson murders that it kind of touches on in like the Tarantino film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but it was told from the point of view of the girls. Like Charles Manson was not like the focus. It was like on the girls and their story.
That would have been a fascinating vehicle for Britney Spears coming just off of her breakdown and kind of trying to rebuild and get her comeback going. That would have been fascinating to see, like a one instead of the route that she did take which was just, we're going to pretend like nothing happened and just rebuild her back up as a big pop star, like throwing her into some kind of a complex dark role like that.
Yeah, and did she ever do a leading role in a movie ever since? Isn't Crossroads her only movie, like as a lead?
She's made like guest
appearances.
A month or two after her hospitalizations. She had a couple of guest spots on How I Met Your Mother.
Oh, okay.
But no
that, feature films, right? Like as the lead actor.
Aside from a very brief cameo in Austin Powers
in Goldmember. Yeah.
But she was playing herself. But other than that, no, she's never been in any.
So we could have made film history back in 08.
That would have been fascinating.
But I remember we had long auditions. I remember I loved Freeway. I'd seen it by 08, and I remember just talking to the director about it, and how I remember him saying like Reese Witherspoon was kind of like reluctant to do it. She was a little bit nervous about playing that kind of role, but boy, she was fantastic.
Great
so
job.
Fantastic in that. And to think that she got her start in kind of this quiet coming of age story, The Man in the Moon, and to see where her career has taken her all the way to now doing all these amazing streaming series like The Morning Show and Big Little Lies. Well, Big Little Lies is more of a cable show for HBO.
Yeah.
But then I loved Little Fires Everywhere, which was on Hulu last year. Did you see Little Fires Everywhere? It was so good.
You know what? It goes to show you how respected of a medium TV has become now.
Mm-hmm.
Where these big name Oscar-winning actors, big screen, they're wanting to do these.
I think at this point, Mark, I think every major actor, if not done a series, has done a film for streaming. I mean, the last year you kind of had to. I mean, Meryl Streep plays a supporting role in Big Little Lies season 2, right? I mean, that was huge. That was like, you got Meryl Streep to play that role?
You got
crazy.
Meryl Streep, you got Nicole Kidman, you got Reese Witherspoon. I mean, you got
Shailene Woodley and Zoe Kravitz.
Whereas 20 years ago, that was the kiss of death. Where if you were a big screen star and you were pushed, that was seen as a downgrade. So
I mean, it really got it kicked off with Netflix in like 2013, 2014. Really, before that, you rarely would see. I mean, you would see the occasional like Glenn Close on a season of Damages. I want to say that. No, not Damages. That was the show she was the lead of. The show before that with what was that show called? Crap.
I don't remember.
She did a show right before Damages where I think she was like a featured role in like a season. So you saw it here and there. But for the most part, film actors stayed on film, right? And now it's like sometimes the best roles are on streaming, not in film. So you see a lot of actors. I would love to see it. I've mentioned her a few times, Sandra Bullock. I would love to see Sandra Bullock do a really great 8-episode series of something. like where she could really, I mean, Bird Box was for Netflix, and I guess she just wrapped a new movie that's premiering on Netflix later this year, a drama. But even though, that's 90 minutes, 2 hours, whatever, I would love to see her sink her teeth into a really rich role for 8 hours. She's never done that before. That would be really fantastic. So yeah, so Man on the Moon would be my second choice, and then first obviously would be To Kill a Mockingbird. I think the takeaway, I feel like most of our listeners have probably seen To Kill a Mockingbird. The takeaway would be, if you have not seen The Man in the Moon, his final film from 91, definitely check that one out. That's a really strong film.
For sure.
All right. So we did it, Mark. We made it to the end. If you have anything to promote or tell our listeners where they can find you online, now would be the time.
I mean, I've got nothing to promote here. Just a normal, like everyone else, I just pop around on social media here and there.
Nice.
I mean, if you want to follow me on Instagram,
follow him on Instagram and check out his stories. You have lots of great stories.
My biggest kick lately, as you are touching upon, it has been like I've been getting into baking, but yes. I will bake and then I will listen and dance. I will bake and play like some kind of like late 90s, early 2000s pop song, and just film myself dancing to it while I bake. And my friends have been like loving it. They've been saying I've been doing it like almost every weekend because that's how exciting my life is during the time of COVID. And they've been saying they love it. So anyway, my Instagram, if you want to follow me and watch that, if you've got nothing better to do with your time, is _Schmerk, SCHMERK. Don't ask, college nickname. That's about the biggest thing I got going on here, other than making guest appearances on Film at 50.
Film at 50. Exactly. Well, thanks again for being here, Mark. This was a lot of fun to have you back. So we've talked about the biggest romantic drama of 70 and 71. If there's a really big romantic drama in 72, I promise we'll pick a different genre. I just thought it kind of made sense to have you back for, I mean, especially with all the background information too. It was like very similar. And I felt like, with another guest, I would just be talking about you the whole time. Well, I talked about this with Mark on Love Story. It made sense to have you back. But we'll move on. I think our listeners are like, okay, what does Mark have to say about a film of a different genre? So we'll pick something fun to do in the future. Thanks all of you for listening to Film at 50. Check us out online at filmat50.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and patreon.com/film at 50. Check that out. 2 bonus episodes every month, including a couple with Mark here. So check that out and support the podcast. Until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.